others, that they will become contentious and quarrelsome and engage in disputes, and that they will dwell stabbing each other with verbal daggers. Then the Buddha continued, but when the Dhamma has been taught by me in such a way through different methods of exposition, it may be expected of those who will concede, allow, and approve of what is well stated and well spoken by others, that they will live in concord with mutual appreciation without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. We all know that the Buddha tailored his discourses to suit his audience. The main aim of the Buddha's varied discourses related to liberation was to present the Four Noble Truths in the best way, most suitable for the listener, so that the listener can benefit. So what works for some may not work for others, and vice versa. So we should always bear in mind that even if we are right, it doesn't mean that others are wrong. They could also be right too in their own ways. Perhaps the safest way is to be receptive. If we are not attached to our own views or opinions, then no matter what others may say, we can keep cool without feeling offended or flattered. And at the same time, we can also learn new things from other people's ideas which are different from ours. Let's get back to the conflict management measures. Now, under the preventive measures, the second part is to abandon the 6 roots of dispute. And these 6 roots of dispute are mentioned in Samagama Sutta itself. And the Buddha said that the root causes of dispute are disrespect towards the teacher, Dhamma and the Sangha, and not practicing the training because of 6 factors. One is angry and revengeful. Second, one is deprecative and prone to one-upmanship. Deprecative means belittling other people's views and opinions, and playing one-upmanship means trying to be better than others just for the sake of being better. Being envious and stingy, being deceitful and fraudulent, pretending that you have jhana when you don't have any, evil wishes and wrong view, and finally, adhering tenaciously to one's views. The last item on the list reminds me of one sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Twos, which I talked about in my opening address. It's about this Brahmin who asked Venerable Mahakaccana, why is it that lay people quarrel and dispute among themselves? Then Venerable Mahakaccana said it was because of attachment and obsession with pleasures of the senses, sense objects. Then he asked, why is it that Samanas and Brahmanas, ascetics and Brahmins, quarrel with one another? They are supposed to have renounced the world, they are not supposed to have any attachment to worldly pleasures and objects. So why do they still quarrel? Then Venerable Mahakaccana said, it's because of attachment and obsession with views. So obviously, if one is in the habit of guarding one's mind door, one will be able to recognize these unwholesome states when they arise and abandon them quickly so that they don't proliferate. Then if they don't proliferate, then a dispute can be avoided. That is why it's so important to be constantly aware of one's thoughts and emotions and intentions. Well, isn't it stated in the Dhammapada that the mind is a forerunner of all things, that it is the leader, and all things are mind-made? The last aspect of preventive measure is to cultivate the 6 memorable things that create love and respect and conduce to concord. These 6 memorable things are called Saraniya Dhamma in Pali. And what are they? Quite simple actually. The first one is to have bodily, verbal and mental metta publicly and privately to your fellow Dhammafarers, your fellow spiritual practitioners. Then the fourth is to share whatever gains that you have with one another. Don't be selfish. Number 5 is to have a common morality. And number 6, to have the same view that leads to the end of suffering. However, despite all these preventive measures, a dispute can still arise. While a dispute need not necessarily arise because of ill will, because of those unwholesome mental states that we talked about, it could also arise because of very good intentions. For example, an arahant, a learned and wise arahant, out of compassion, may want to point out certain practices and interpretations of a very group of influential monks who are doing things the wrong way. They are saying things which are not Dhamma as Dhamma, things which are not Vinaya as Vinaya. So this arahant, out of compassion, might start a dispute. So not all disputes are bad. Not all disputes are unwholesome. Some disputes are good because a dispute is when people disagree, right? So an arahant is right, but those who disagree with him are wrong. So how do we prove who is right and who is wrong? So a dispute like that becomes a legal issue and has to be settled by certain Vinaya procedures. Well, the first thing is the disputing parties should meet cordially. And secondly, they should sit down together and agree on certain guidelines, Dhamma Neti, Dhamma guidelines. Of course, not just any guidelines that they think of, but guidelines based on the scriptures. So the criteria are twofold. They are doctrinal as well as experiential. And even under doctrinal criteria, there is canonical and post-canonical. We can find some explicit doctrinal criteria on how to determine what is or is not Dhamma Vinaya in the suttas and in post-canonical literature. Looking at the suttas, first of all, in Mahaparinibbana Sutta, before the Buddha passed away, he reminded Ananda that after his death, there is still a final authority for the monks. He said, "Perhaps, Ananda, it may occur to some of you the teaching is without the teacher. We no longer have a teacher. But Ananda, it is not to be regarded in that way. The Dhamma and Vinaya that have been discoursed and laid down by me shall be your teacher after my demise." It is recorded earlier in the same Mahaparinibbana Sutta as well as in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta number 180, called the Mahapadesa Sutta, that the Buddha had proclaimed the 4 great standards to determine what is the Dhamma and Vinaya. Because in those days, we don't have any books, no tape recorders, no digital record of what the Buddha taught. People remembered things that they have heard and passed things from generation to generation orally. So these 4 great standards give us an idea of the scenario during the Buddha's time. He says that when a monk makes a claim that this is the Dhamma, this is the Vinaya, this is the teachings of the Master, and I heard and learned it from the Buddha himself. Or he may say, I heard and learned it from the Sangha in a certain monastery with its elders and leaders. Or he could have heard it from many learned Theras in a certain monastery, or from a learned Thera in a certain monastery. Here again, the Buddha encouraged the monks to practice equanimity and objectivity. He said, in such situations, without rejoicing in or scorning the monk's words, the monk's claims, we should investigate to see if such teachings are included in the suttas or seen in the Vinaya. If they are, we may conclude that they are the words of the Buddha and they have been well learned by the speaker. Otherwise, if they are not found in the suttas, they are not seen in the Vinaya, then we may conclude that they are not the words of the Buddha and they have been wrongly learned by the speaker, and we should reject them. Well, notice that according to this set of criteria, no consideration is given to the interpretations of commentaries or elders. So if we adhere strictly to this guideline, any doctrine that cannot be found in the suttas or the Vinaya has to be rejected, as it is not the Dhamma Vinaya of the Buddha. But this is the province of scholars only. For how many of us have studied the whole of the Pitakas, the suttas, or the Vinayas to decide or determine whether a claim can be found in the sutta or in the Vinaya? How many of us actually have the inclination, the interest, or the resources, the time and resources to really do the research? How many of you? Well, if you can't do that, then if you listen to somebody's claim and you accept it, what is it based on? It is based on one of those 5 grounds that we talked about, right? It's either based on faith, or because you like it, because of it's your tradition, because you have your own theory about it, and finally because of another person's view. Well, if you accept anything based on any of these 5 grounds, then the Buddha said, if you really preserve truth, then it's still not sufficient to say only this is true and others are wrong. Nevertheless, although this injunction by the Buddha may be relevant during his time, we cannot now use that as the only yardstick. Why? Because we don't really know what the Buddha actually said. What we have are scriptures. And how accurate are the scriptures? Nowadays, with modern methods of multidisciplinary research, people are beginning to compare scriptures from different traditions in different languages. And we find that no one collection of the scriptures is perfect. These standards are very high. If anything that cannot be found in your corpus of suttas or Vinaya, then out it goes. But later teachers, after the scriptures have been canonized, came up with another list. This is the Post-Canonical Doctrinal Criteria. This list was first mentioned in the Milinda Panya that was supposed to have been written almost 900 years after the Buddha's parinibbana. This list of the hierarchy of authority was established by the Dhamma Sanghahakas, the 500 arahants who sat in the first synod, the first council, soon after the Buddha passed away. This set of hierarchy of authority was formulated for use in the Vinaya in order to help the Vinaya experts to decide on certain cases of committing offense. But it can also be applicable to the evaluation of suttas as well. Let's go through this list. The highest on the hierarchy of authority is what we call the Sutta. Now, this is strange. They use the word Sutta, but this is found in the Vinaya Pitaka. So the word Sutta has a wider meaning than what we usually understand. Here it means the thread or principle that ties things together. And this refers to the whole Vinaya Pitaka. The second is the corollary to the thread or principle. And these are the 4 great standards in the Vinaya, which is a bit different from that we stated just now. The fourth is teacher's doctrine, Acharya Vada. And this teacher's doctrine refers to the commentary established by the 500 Arahants who were at the first synod. Now this is difficult. The commentary that we have right now is a mixture, because when Buddhaghosa translated and compiled the commentaries into what we have right now, he worked with a number of commentaries. They were in Sinhalese, and then he found that there were inconsistencies in some of these commentaries, and so he tried to resolve the inconsistencies with the help of the views and interpretations of the Theras of the Mahavihara at that time. So he came out with this new commentary, which is now in Pali, and after that all the other Sinhalese commentaries disappeared. So we don't have any evidence at all. So we cannot now really differentiate what are those passages in the existent commentary that come from the 500 Arahants and which came later. And the final one is personal idea. Now we have to be careful with the third on the list, because it says Acharya Vada, the doctrine of the teacher. It doesn't mean your teacher now. It means those teachers, the 500 Arahants who were at the first synod, first council. So the views of your present teacher now will come under number 4. It is a personal idea. In fact, in the commentaries, we have a lot of Theravada, a lot of doctrines or views and interpretations given by the elders during the time when Buddhaghosa was writing the commentary or compiling the commentary. So certain areas where there are inconsistencies among the available commentaries in Sinhalese, then these Theras, these elders, would give their opinion. And Venerable Buddhaghosa would go through all of them, and sometimes even when he disagreed with them, he would give his own personal opinion. So you have actually, a whole combination of many different ideas that can be found in the commentaries themselves. So within the commentaries, Venerable Buddhaghosa and subsequent commentators after him have been very careful about distinguishing what is canon, what is commentary, what are the elders' opinions and interpretation, and what is his own personal interpretation. Okay, so even modern commentators nowadays, for example, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable Analayo Bhikkhu, Venerable Thanissaro Bhikkhu, they also write commentaries in English nowadays. Venerable Thanissaro Bhikkhu is very famous for his Vinaya commentary, the Buddhist monastic code. And Venerable Analayo has written doctoral theses on the Satipatthana based on his research into canonical, post-canonical, and modern teachers' ideas about the Satipatthana. And he made it very, very clear. This is what the canon says, different Nikayas, there are different suttas, and then this is what the commentators say, these are what teachers nowadays say, and these are what modern meditation teachers say, comparing different traditions, different meditative traditions. Now, Venerable Analayo himself was a very ardent meditator before he started his PhD on the Satipatthana Sutta. So his work is not just an academic treatise, but it is a real survey of the theory and practice of Satipatthana from the past until today. Well, according to this list, you are supposed to grade the reliability of a claim according to this hierarchy of authority. But still, this is not easy. It still belongs to the province of the scholars, because you need to be able to recognize what is from the sutta, what is the commentary, what is a corollary to the sutta, and what is personal idea. So again, since we can't even be sure what number 3 really means, because now the commentaries are all a mixture, not only of the original commentary of the 500 Arahants, they are also now mixed with other Sinhalese interpretations. So again, this is also not a very, very reliable criteria to evaluate a claim. Most fortunately, the Buddha also gave 2 lists of experiential criteria. When I made a search in the CSCD, VRI Vipassana Research Institute CSCD of the whole Tipitaka, there were only 2 places in the suttas where the Buddha defined what is Dhamma Vinaya using experiential criteria. And this can be found in the Sankhitta Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 8, Sutta number 53, a reply he gave to his aunt and foster mother, Gotami Mahapajapati, a list of 8 criteria. And he also gave another list of 7 criteria to Venerable Upali, also in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sevens, called Sattusasana Sutta. Let's look at the first one. First group of 8 given to Gotami Mahapajapati. The Buddha says that if you know of any Dhamma, any qualities that lead to the following results, then you can be sure that that is the Dhamma Vinaya of the Buddha. So you make note of this, very important. First one is, it leads to dispassion. When you practice that Dhamma or you read that Dhamma, it encourages you to be dispassionate. Secondly, it leads to being unfettered, to be free from the Sangyojanas. Third, to shedding. The shedding means to putting down, to shedding away your kilesas. Fourth, to modesty, to being of few wishes. 5, to contentment. 6, to seclusion. Seclusion means physical seclusion as well as mental seclusion, not getting caught up in your thoughts about other things. 7, to aroused effort, become energetic. And number 8, to being unburdensome, being easily supported. Not like some yogis here, which I hear complaints from the organizer, who are very fussy. They want this and they want that. They want to change their room. They want, all sorts of things, making a lot of demands. That's not the sort of Dhamma that the Buddha preached. The Buddha always said that you must try to be unburdensome, easily supported by people. Be contented with whatever that you are provided with. When you do a certain sort of practice, you should try to evaluate and see whether the practice that you are doing will lead to these things or not. And if it does lead to these things, you don't have to worry whether it's found in the sutta or found in the Vinaya, or in the commentary, whether it's the teacher's opinion. You can be sure that this is the Dhamma, this is the Vinaya, this is the teacher's instruction. But of course, this also comes from the sutta. So in the first place, you have to believe that this comes from the sutta. Let's look at the next list that's given to Venerable Upali. Now this one is the more high end. That one is low end, because that you can apply to preliminary stages of your practice. But this one looks like it's the ultimate aim. Again, the Buddha said the same thing. As for the qualities of which you may know that lead to utter disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to Nibbana. You may definitely hold this is the Dhamma, this is the Vinaya, this is the teacher's instruction. Actually, these words are all synonyms of Nibbana that can be found in the suttas. On the other hand, if you want to apply it to a lower end, you can also gauge in the course of your practice whether as you practice more, you become more and more disenchanted with the lures of the world, whether you have less passion for sensual desires, whether you have more and more cessation of your worldly worries and concerns, whether you are becoming calmer, and whether the knowledge you have is something that is direct rather than something which you learn from books. Is it something that you really experience yourself? And when that really happens, you have self-awakening. This is when insight occurs within you. Of course, Nibbana refers to the calming, right? But there are various levels of Nibbana. You can have momentary Nibbana when you temporarily suppress your defilements. In fact, in the suttas, being in a jhana is also Nibbana. It's figuratively speaking, you are also in Nibbana because you have caused the cessation of certain factors of the five hindrances of Vitakka, Vichara, and Piti, and so forth. So for most of us who are not scholastically inclined, and even for scholars, these two sets of criteria seem to be more reliable, don't you think? Actually, these two lists of criteria agree very much with the attributes of the Dhamma, which we chant every day. Swakhato Bhagavata Dhammo, right? Sanditiko, Agaliko, Ehipasiko, Opanayiko, Pachattam, Veridabo, Vinyuhi. Right? So these are the attributes of the Dhamma that are experiential. Swakhato means well preached. Well, maybe that is not so experiential. No, that is, you have to accept that on faith. It is directly visible, sanditiko. Akaliko, it is immediate. Ehipasiko, inviting one to come and see. Opanayiko, worthy of application. Pachatam Vedidabo Vinyuhi, to be personally experienced by the wise. In several suttas, the Buddha was asked by several people. Some were Brahmins, lay people, some were wanderers, some were bhikkhus. And the Buddha gave answers that vary a little, but they all talk about being aware of lobha, dosa, and moha when they arise in you. And he says, when there is lobha in you and you realize and you are aware that it is there, and lobha is not there and you know that it's not there, that is the time, that is when the Dhamma is directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, worthy of application, and to be personally experienced by the wise. In one particular sutta called Sanditthika Dhamma Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Nines, Sutta number 46, Venerable Ananda was asked by Venerable Udayi, the Dhamma is directly visible. The Dhamma is directly visible. Friend, to what extent is it said by the Blessed One that the Dhamma is directly visible? Venerable Udayi asked Ananda. So this is the answer given by Reverend Ananda, not the Buddha. Right? And then Ananda says, well, when a bhikkhu dwells, having attained the first jhana, that's when the Dhamma is directly visible in a figurative way. So he went on to say the same thing for the first, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, up to the arupas, and up to Nirodha Samapatti. And he says that all these are instances of how the Dhamma is stated to be directly visible in a figurative way. Must make a correction. He talked only until the fourth arupa ayatana. That means until neva sanya na sanyayatana. Because from a non-figurative direct way, the Dhamma is said to be visible, directly visible, when a bhikkhu, having totally, completely transcended the fourth arupa, and then having attained Nirodha Samapatti, and then after that having seen with wisdom and attained the destruction of the cankas, then only, non-figuratively, the Dhamma is directly visible. So let me ask you, during the course of your retreat here, was the Dhamma directly visible to you? Don't think that the Dhamma is directly visible only when you attain the first jhana to the arupas. Remember, the Buddha said at the beginning that if you are aware when lobha, dosa and moha is present, and you are aware of them absent when they are not there, that is also when the Dhamma is directly visible. It is immediate, it is inviting one to come and see, it is worthy of application, it is to be personally experienced by the wise. So, in the course of this retreat, if you have noticed lobha, dosa and moha within yourself, at that time the Dhamma was visible to you. So don't despair, even though you didn't get jhana. But experiencing these attributes of the Dhamma at the lower end doesn't mean that it's useless, or it's ineffective, or it is to be looked down upon. There's one particular sutta called the Attinukho Pariyaya Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha, after asking the monks, he answered, there is a method by means of which a bhikkhu, apart from the 5 grounds that we talked about just now, apart from faith, apart from fancy, apart from oral tradition, apart from personal theory, apart from reflective acceptance of a view, that bhikkhu can declare final knowledge. That method, what is that method? That method is, if a bhikkhu perceived